Okay. All right. And wonderful. All right. So good morning, everyone. My name is Victoria Custodio, and I'm with the California Department of Public Health and the Active Transportation Safety Program. And on behalf of the entire Active Transportation Resource Center non-infrastructure team, I'd like to welcome you to our Active Transportation non-infrastructure funded program technical assistance teleconference call today. So always a mouthful. This is a special teleconference that is intended for those that are developing and managing non-infrastructure projects and programs, which include education, encouragement, enforcement, and plans, as well as those that are developing and managing non-infrastructure components of combination infrastructure and non-infrastructure projects from all active transportation program cycles. So welcome. If you've joined us for our teleconferences in the past, you'll know that it's our intention at the ATRC for this teleconference to be as interactive as possible. And that said, we currently have the phones on mute, but you will be able to ask questions throughout the duration of the teleconference to make comments through the chat feature, which I think some of you have used this morning already. And then, of course, we will be able to unmute you if you have some comments and questions that you'd like to share verbally. As always, I just want to say thank you in advance for bearing with us, especially if we have any technology snafus this morning. And I also want to apologize in advance for any unintended interruptions, dogs barking, cats meowing, doors slamming, teenage doors slamming this morning. So we're in a new world right now with everyone working from home. This is the first teleconference the ATRC has offered since the state stay-at-home order. So we're just really grateful that everyone can join us this morning and has the flexibility to be on the phone. Next slide, Marianne. Okay, one's back up. Perfect. All right. Before we get into our speaker introduction and our agenda for today, we just want to reiterate the ATRC's motivation in hosting these quarterly teleconferences. So we're here to help California meet its long-term multimodal transportation, sustainability, health, safety, and equity goals. We are here to help build your awareness as well as confidence and trust in the Active Transportation Resource Center and your understanding of ATP project requirements, both as applicants for future cycles as well and as implementers of existing cycles. And of course, we are here, our focus is to assist you in making your ATP project as successful as possible, and which in turn will help meet the goals of the program, which is to really get more people to safely walk and bicycle for transportation. So that always just grounds us a little bit. We're here to help. Next slide, please. Okay, so we have a team today that's presenting, and as I said, I'm Victoria Custodio, part of the California Department of Public Health. We sit within the Centers for Healthy Communities, and specifically in the Injury and Violence Prevention branch. And I'll turn it over to Marianne so you can introduce yourself.
Sure. I work with Victoria at the Department of Public Health, and thank you so much for joining us. We're here to offer technical assistance for your NI projects. And so definitely reach out to us at the end of the slide presentation. You'll have our contact information if you don't already, because I know I've talked to several of you that are on today. And I am sort of running the meeting. So again, this is, as Victoria mentioned, this is our first time doing everything remotely. So thank you for your patience.
She's doing a great job. Summer, are you on the phone? Do you want to do a quick introduction of yourself?
Sure. Hi, everyone. So glad to have you today on our Infrastructure Teleconference. My name is Summer Lopez. I'm with Caltrans headquarters. I work in the Active Transportation Program with non-infrastructure plans, as well as the Active Transportation Resource Center. As you all know, Emily Abraham, she is the program manager and is currently on maternity leave. So while she's on leave, I am managing the program in her place. And again, we're just so thankful that you're all here today and really looking forward to today's teleconference.
Thanks, Summer. And I'm not sure if Rhiannah has joined us this morning, but for those of you on the call, let's actually first check. Rhiannah, are you on the call this morning? Are you able to unmute yourself and just give a quick hello as one of our featured speakers today? Okay. We understand that Rhiannah has a meeting that goes up until 10 and might take a little bit longer for her to get onto the call this morning. But Rhiannah Gordon is the Racial Equity Program Manager at Caltrans within the Office of Sustainability, and she's going to be our featured speaker later in the call, and she's going to help kick off our discussion on equity in the Active Transportation Program. We're very pleased to have her join us today. And I'll do another introduction when we get to that part of the agenda. Okay, next slide, please. Okay. So Summer, I have this as your slides. Would you be able to talk us through this? Great.
Yes, I'm so sorry. My mic was muted. So hello, everyone. This is our second ATP non-infrastructure funded programs technical assistance teleconference for the year. And we hope that you are able to join us for our first teleconference. These teleconferences aim to be of assistance to you, the implementers of funded ATP non-infrastructure projects. The first teleconference gave an overview of non-infrastructure programs and updates, as well as discussion. And after the first teleconference, the ATRC really just wanted to continue to offer ATP non-infrastructure program teleconferences about every quarter. So at this teleconference, as well as future teleconferences, we plan to have specific focus on non-infrastructure program types and topics so that non-infrastructure implementers can attend those that are relevant to them and also have opportunity to virtually network with each other and ask questions of others doing similar work. These aren't any extra requirements and are not mandatory to attend, but we think it's very valuable resource to have implementers just get together and have the opportunity to virtually network and have conversations with other implementers throughout the state. Again, these differ from our generic webinars because they're specific to ATP non-infrastructure project implementers, and we really just want to create a space for discussion. We expect each teleconference to have the first 30 or so minutes to be presentation style, and then the remaining 30 minutes to an hour will be for discussion items and just for virtually networking. So for today's agenda, we'll be giving an overview of the program as well as some of the non-infrastructure resources. And we will also be talking about the time extension process for existing ATP projects. We're going to give a COVID-19 public health reminder update, review some of the new resources that we put out, and then have a rich discussion on equity and active transportation, where we'll invite Rhiannah Gordon to speak. And then lastly, if we have any time left, we'd like to share some upcoming events and programmatic successes and challenges, and just encourage you to speak up. And again, as Victoria said, if you have any questions throughout, please feel free to either put it in the chat or just let us know, and we can unmute you and have a discussion from there. Next slide.
Hello, everyone. This is Marianne. And just in case you haven't heard, the ATP cycle is open and up. And during April and May, the California Transportation Commission met several times to discuss and agree upon extensions for the different transportation grants. And up on this slide, you'll see the one that you're probably most interested in, the ATP Cycle 5 project application has been extended to September, and the quick build projects are due shortly if you're interested in applying for the quick build projects. You can find more information off the CTC website, and the link is below. And there are many links in our presentation today. Everything will be available via slides afterwards so that you can follow up with those particular links. So if you, we're not going to click to the links, but we'll have many links, especially on our COVID portion of our presentation. So don't worry, they'll be there. Okay, let's go on to the time extension amendment process. I'll turn that over to Summer.
Yeah, so this slide is really just an overview of the time extension information that was pulled together in a presentation done by the CTC. I won't reiterate all of this information, but I just put it here on the slide. We put it here on the slide so that you're able to access it as a resource. So here's some highlights that you'll want to remember. One, the tentative schedule for approval of previously approved time extension amendments that may require more time related to COVID-19. Those are listed here. So since we've already passed the June meeting, any time extensions that are lapsing or expiring between July and December, you can go on the Caltrans website and you'll find the COVID timely use of funds form on the timely use of funds webpage. And it will be handled by on a case-by-case basis at the August, October, or December CTC meeting. The second is that if you have received a time extension already, you can amend it for up to 20 months total, including the time that you've already received. And if you haven't received a time extension but are in need of one, then you can receive one up to 20 months by filling out that paperwork. And then there's a link here. This is for the original presentation that was given. There's so much good information in there if you have any additional questions related to timely use of funds and specifically time extensions due to COVID-19.
The next section is on COVID-19. Oh my gosh. Wow. What can we say? It's really hit us hard and we're all dealing with it. And the next portion of the meeting are the COVID-19 updates. First, I would like to remind you that the two websites we have are two primary sources of COVID information for our state. And we recognize that there is a good deal of information available that you're able to read and reference. But for the state of California, these are the two state-administered websites, both which are updated regularly. And there are others which are specific to, well, before I give you the two other resources, links to COVID updates, in case you didn't know, counties are opening by phases, and they're based on these 5 criteria. One is that COVID-19 confirmed cases in the last 14 days. So for example, my county had moved to another phase, but now we're back. And I think that's many of the counties in California, unfortunately, and it's basically based on how many people were tested and confirmed cases relative to the population. The hospital capacity, most of our hospitals are okay, except for perhaps LA County, making sure that all our essential workers dealing with COVID have the supplies they need, and our skilled nursing facilities have a mitigation plan for any further cases appearing. As I said, most of us are in we were in phase 2, and as of June 26th, Governor Newsom asked that we all wear masks in public, so that was for the whole state, and of course maintain physical distancing. And as I said, each county has maybe in different phases, especially if you're in a rural county. So do refer to your county website for guidance. These two particular links are for schools, which I know everybody is interested in, concerned about. So the two that that we had in the first COVID introductory slide are important, and these are specific to guidance on school and any school-based program. Victoria, did you want to talk about these resources?
Sure, yes. We have probably, as you have been, inundated with a number of different emails and updates from different organizations within the transportation industry on how best to respond and recover from the impacts of COVID-19 and to, of course, work within the new guidance, public health guidance that's been asked of all of us across the state. So we just wanted to take a few minutes and highlight some relevant documents that we think are worth the Active Transportation Non-Infrastructure Program network to consider. Every resource, is coming from a specific place, and it's very likely that not everyone will use the same guidance to kind of move forward, but we thought since this is a statewide network, we'd put a number of different resources out there for your information in case they haven't yet crossed your path. So on this page, you'll see three resources, all from NACTO, and NACTO has put together a specific COVID-19 Transportation Response Center. The website, the main website for the Response Center is at the first bullet, nacto.org. And then we've received a special suggestion to look more closely at the Streets for Pandemic Response and Recovery section, and that has a lot of detail about using street space for increasing space for walking and bicycling specifically, and also for public use. We know that we're hearing more and more that the risk for COVID transmission is minimized during in outdoor space, again, while maintaining social distance. So this particular guide gives some suggestions on how to consider spacing differences to allow for more activity, especially in regard to additional learning, whether that's school or for schools or communities using school, the areas surrounding schools, the streets surrounding the streets surrounding schools. And then I haven't had the opportunity to watch this specific webinar, but it's really, I think, at the heart of kind of what the issues are with COVID and planning and providing quality public education while everything is closed is how do you really do community engagement during COVID-19. So NACTO has put together a webinar on this, and we're going to be listening to this as a team, and we encourage you to also do that and also consider share other community engagement activities that you think are working during this stay-at-home order. Okay, next slide, please. All right. And the Centers for Disease Control also has some readiness and planning tools that we think are worth looking at. And the two that have caught our eyes for the non-infrastructure community are event gathering readiness and planning tools and the youth programs and camps. And we understand right now that the state is still in a stay-at-home order and public gatherings are not allowed at this point in time. However, just like we know the Safe Routes to School community is doing for schools, we think it's really important to use this time wisely to kind of use the tools that are emerging to plan ahead and see what is in fact being asked of everyone as we move forward in trying to mitigate the spread of coronavirus. So the event gathering we envision as a checklist for those that are considering doing activities as part of Open Streets initiatives. This is, again, looking towards the future, understanding right now that this is not allowable given our state stay-at-home order, but for planning purposes. And then for youth programs and camps, we think that this is also a valuable tool if in fact, pedestrian and bicycle educators are planning to do work. The checklists that are provided by the CDC really do run down kind of the things to think about in terms of staging an area, maintaining the area, disinfecting and cleaning the area, and then all of the communication that needs to go into making sure that everyone's aware of what each of us needs to be doing to maintain the environment to the utmost health it can provide. Next slide. All right, this is where we stop talking and we look to our network to see what questions you have or what comments you have. I want to throw in that we always use this opportunity to learn from what's happening in the local, what's happening locally. So please feel free to chime in right now with anything that we've talked about up to this point.
And you can raise your hand. You should see that hand next to your name, or you can type your question into chat.
All right, I see. Our first question has come in, and this is Summer. I'm going to prompt you. Can you clarify the time extensions that are allowed? The slide indicates 20 months are allowed, but on some of the resources and forms we see only 12 months.
Yeah, so for COVID-19 related time extensions, it's a total of 20-month extension. So if you've already received a time extension, it's likely that it was 12 months, and you can amend that time extension for up to 20 months total. Does that make sense?
All right.
Yeah.
I believe it did make sense from my end, but we'll see if there's any follow-up questions on that. All right, do we have any more questions coming in? And Marian, do you want to review for everyone just how you could raise your hand and ask a question if you'd rather ask a question over the phone?
Sure. Next to your name, it depends on really how you've logged in, but next to your name, there at the bottom, there's a hand, and you can raise your hand, and you'll be moved to the top of the list, and I can unmute you. And the chat, we can, so everyone can hear your question, or the chat, which make sure you send it to all participants so all the panelists can see your question via chat. I don't see any hands raised.
Okay. All right, well, let's move on to the next section, which is to review some new ATRC resources. Summer, are you ready to kick it off? Or continue us on?
Yes. Yeah, go ahead and go to the next slide. So we're going to talk about what's new with the ATRC and talk about some resources, but first I just kind of wanted to give a quick reminder what the ATRC is. We always like to give a shout out just so everyone's aware of what it is. So the Active Transportation Resource Center is a project funded through the ATP and administered by Caltrans. We function as the resource center and are driven by our mission to provide resources, technical assistance, and training to transportation partners across California. And we do that so that we can increase the opportunity for the success of active transportation projects. In order to staff our ATRC, we Caltrans hire subject matter experts to develop, disseminate, and deliver resources, training, technical assistance, all in support of better active transportation projects. So our website, which is connected to the Caltrans ATP website, is caatpresources.org. And if you haven't already, I highly encourage you to sign up for our listserv so that you can always stay informed of all of the resources that we can offer. Next slide. You can go to the next slide. So as non-infrastructure implementers, you may be aware that these are some of the elements of non-infrastructure programs, but this is something that we've newly developed and completed and posted to our website. So I wanted to make a quick plug for it. And if you go on our website, you'll see these fact sheets that we've developed, and they just contain simple definitions as well as sample activities and considerations for ATP planners and implementers, as well as the communities that they serve. So these are the 6 E's that we have in our program, and these fact sheets are just very helpful for developing your NI programs. Next slide. Next slide, Mary. Oh, thank you. Perfect. So another new feature that we've created to act as both a resource and a highlight of non-infrastructure programs is our project profiles. So the goal is to showcase components and outcomes of non-infrastructure programs and projects, and we also do these for infrastructure projects. So don't feel not included if you have a combo project going and you want to submit something, or if you know an agency that's done an excellent job on an infrastructure project, you can let them know about these as well. We plan to have 12 of these finished by the end of the year. So we do find candidates for these project profile highlights through submitted completion reports. But if you would like to have your completed project highlighted, please reach out to us and let us know. This is an example of a recently completed project and what our project profiles look like. You can find them, the ones that we've completed so far, under our resources tab on our website. So definitely check those out and let us know if you want a project highlighted. We would love to create one of these. Next slide. This is one of the newest resources that we've developed. It's developed by both Caltrans and CTC. We recognize that the active transportation program is oversubscribed. So we created this document so agencies are aware of other funding programs that are available. Some of them are not so competitive, and they all fund active transportation project types. So this resource lists out project types and examples of projects that are eligible for each program that's listed in the resource. You can also find this on the ATRC website as well as on the CTC website. Next slide.
Hi, everyone. This is Victoria jumping in. We wanted to also share another resource, which really is not an ATRC resource, but we were lucky to be part of the initial conversation that created a crowdsourced spreadsheet of lots of alternative education and encouragement activities that can be done during school shutdowns for Safe Routes to School practitioners. And so kudos to the Safe Routes partnership for taking this over and really developing it and making sure that there's a quality control element to it all. It's still available as a Google Doc, so we wanted to highlight this to you if you haven't seen it. We also want to thank Jeannie LePage from Ecology Action, who has been a leader in the Safe Routes to School community here in California, pretty much for the decade that I've been working on Safe Routes to School and active transportation, who convened everyone at the start of the state stay-at-home order to ask how we could pivot and make some of available resources that could be used for sharing in light of school closure. So we wanted to just highlight this again, even though it's technically not an ATRC owned resource. Okay, next slide.
Actually, if I can add to the ATRC partner resource that Victoria was just speaking of, we actually did develop a document that can be found on the ATRC website that includes this link and also provides a lot of additional resources and ideas for non-infrastructure projects and programs. And I've just, we've just been encouraging people to take a look at that if you're planning on developing a program for cycle 5 and you want COVID, to be, part of that, and especially in light of school closures. So that's one thing. Another thing is that if you are looking to revise your programs and projects due to COVID-19, this Google Doc, as well as the one that we developed, they both are great resources. The piece that we developed, we released back in like April. So there is a little bit of information in there that may be, I guess, outdated now as we're learning new information about COVID every day, but it is still a really good resource and I highly recommend it. And I also wanted to let you all know that we did release our first ATRC newsletter at the end of spring. So I think that was around April or May. And that also has a lot of good information about the active transportation program. And I see a couple more questions coming in about time extensions. There's some information on that in the newsletter as well. So definitely go to our website, and both of those resources can be found on our homepage. Okay, next slide. So as we announced at our last teleconference, we did update the non-infrastructure program guidance, and we did that so that it was a little bit more flexible than previous cycles. The reason that we did that is because we really want to encourage your creativity in what your NI projects and programs can look like. So we want agencies to feel comfortable consulting with us if there is something that they'd like to include in their scope that may not be included in the eligibility guidance. So as really the best thing to remember is that as long as it gets at encouraging active transportation, educating people around active transportation or safety in active transportation, then we really want to be flexible in including it in the scope of work, which is your 22R. So please, at any time, just reach out to us if you feel like, I'm not sure if I see this in the eligibility guidance. It may be eligible, and it's all about creativity and innovation. So it's really just to be used as guidance, and we hope that you find it more flexible for cycle 5. Next slide.
Hello, everyone. This is Marianne. And other new resources that have been put on our California ATP resources site, our ATRC site, are 2 flash trainings, which would be able to help you with your Cycle 5 application. One that we just uploaded in May was how to determine median household income by census tract off the census website. And then the second one that was uploaded in February was if you're going to partner with a California Conservation Corps, there's instructions on how to connect with them and work that into your application. As a reminder, your flash trainings are how-to. They're not interactive webinars or anything. They're just how to do whatever the flash training is about. And the link is below for that particular flash training.
Okay, I believe our next slide is, this is Victoria again, and our next slide is our placeholder for opening up questions to all of you. And looking at our chat right now, we had some questions about the availability of the link, which I typed up on the slide, on the chat, that all of the slides and recording will be available after the teleconference and posted to, we actually do a special correspondence or email out to everyone who's attended, and then we'll definitely post everything onto our website as well. So you'll have access to all of the information that was previously shared. And then as Mary Summers suggested, there are a few time extension questions that might have come in, but not specific ones, but yes, I think if you aren't familiar with the time extension and finding that you're needing one, we really suggest you look through the resources that we've shared and take a look and consult with your partners, of course, and see if that's something worth doing. We know COVID has impacted everyone differently, and so I think the CTEC has been very generous with this plan. Okay, we do have one question, and so I'll read it out. Is there any guidance yet to projects with local law enforcement partnerships, safe through school programs? And this is the national partnership issued a statement suggesting that they're dropping enforcement as one of their 6 E's. At this time, we are not aware of any guidance that's out there, but rest assured that we are going to be communicating closely with the partnership and other organizations. We work very closely with California Walks and Cal Bike to hear kind of what they're thinking. But at this time, from our understanding, there's no guidance yet available that we are able to share or recommend.
If you'd like to speak your question, just raise your hand and I can unmute you.
I will say we didn't listen here, but there have been a few webinars that have invitations that have come across our decks that do look interesting. And for example, we understand that San Francisco is doing some innovative work around enforcement and with their walkability community. So we can find that, and if there's somebody interested in that link, we can get that out to you. I believe that that's been a recorded webinar. Oh, we've got another question. Okay. So is the lease or purchase of a vehicle trailer or / trailer to transport bikes and equipment used to conduct education and encouragement allowable? Summer, that's a question for you.
Yes, I would say more the lease rather than the purchase of a vehicle or trailer. But again, it really just depends on the project and what the project looks like and how often it's going to be used, things like that. So really, the idea of the non-infrastructure project and programs, we really just want to encourage and see sustainability throughout the program. So as long as that's always kept at the forefront of your mind when you're developing your project and your proposals, then yeah, a vehicle and trailer would be an okay purchase or lease, as long as it's sustainable and it's used for the program.
Okay, great. Thank you. And just as a reminder, yeah, there is the non-infrastructure guidance. It's on the Caltrans website that can point to that information, I think, as well. Another question. This is related to the ATP application. CDPH approved, or sorry, and CDP. I shouldn't edit the question before I read it, but it says, can CDPH approve IDCR? Oh, CDPH approved IDCR be used for our ATP application? If not, and we don't have a federally negotiated rate, do we have to get our rate approved by Caltrans, or do we just go with a 10% minimum? So I am going to just say that yes, no, CDPH. I don't believe that we have a role in that application. I think everything has to be approved by Caltrans. Not I think, I know. So. So that's just the, I'll jump in and answer that question. And hopefully that answers
and
it.
we have someone who raised their hand. So early on. Oh,
okay.
Maybe he unraised it because I don't see it anymore. Jim, if you wanted to speak, go ahead and raise your hand again. There's another question in the
Did Jim raise his hand? I'm so sorry. Oh, Jim does not have a question. Okay. Thanks,
Okay.
Jim.
Am I muted or am I on?
Oh, you're on. You're on, Jim.
Okay. Let me throw a few things out here. Earlier on, we were talking about enforcement and the police. Okay. Enforcement can be in several different modes, and people need to think about that. What I'd like to push is that enforcement can be and is as simple as a crossing guard. Okay, it's keeping the children in the lines and keeping the cars out of the lines. This doesn't mean that they need a badge, they don't need a gun, they don't need a cruiser, none of that. Okay, no weapons, any of that nonsense. A crossing guard, even though ATP does not pay the salary of the crossing guard, ATP does pay for training and outfitting as far as helmets or vests, that sort of thing. We need to really humanize enforcement, because quite often it's a volunteer, a parent volunteer. My wife was a crossing guard for years in the Yuba City Unified School District, and it was a great thing. You don't need to think about police when you think about enforcement. Okay, we need to really humanize this a little bit better. As far as that's concerned, enforcement is necessary. We need crossing guards. If you're in a safe routes to school situation, if they're a K through 12 or a K through 8, those younger kids are going to need a crossing guard there. They're not often going to have an older student that's going to help them across or anything like that. The school district needs to buck up and pay for that crossing guard, and ATP can at least help and assist with the training costs and the equipping costs. But I really want to reiterate that when we discuss enforcement, we don't need a badge or a cruiser or any of that kind of thing. We don't need the backlash that's going on currently in the cities and counties around the country and that sort of thing. When we had the big event down in West Sacramento, there were several speakers that were very concerned about enforcement, and they were right. They had every right to say what they said. They had valid points to convey, and they conveyed them very well. But there is another side to enforcement, and that's what I'm trying to convey now, is that a crossing guard is not a policeman. They are not a peace officer or anything like that. They are a servant to the school district, and it would be a big help.
Yeah.
Thanks, Jim.
Yeah.
I really appreciate your input, and it's a great segue because that's going to be the next portion of our meeting. Thanks, Jim.
Yeah, I really appreciate that as well, Jim. So on that note, we have about 45 minutes, which is so our teleconference is a little bit longer so that we could have a little more robust discussion and some sharing. In which our purpose is to really hear from everyone and take notes and determine really just, I think we're in the information gathering period. So with our network and with all of you. So on that note, can I do a quick check to see if Rhiannah, if you're on the phone, can we unmute you?
I'm here.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, wonderful. All right, so I'm going to move us to our next section, and which is where we're going to talk about equity efforts at Caltrans. We have a wonderful speaker today. Her name is Rhiannah Gordon. She's the Racial Equity Program Manager within the Office of Sustainability. And on that note, Rhiannah, can I turn it over to you?
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much.
Maybe. Okay, I can't share. I guess I'll let you advance the slides.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay, so as introduced, my name is Rhiannah Gordon. I am the Racial Equity Program Manager at Caltrans. A lot of you may be wondering what that means, who I am. It's a relatively new position for the department. I've been in my role for about a year now. And it really stemmed out of some of the things I'm going to talk about. I'm going to keep my comments pretty brief so that there's opportunity for a robust conversation. So let's go ahead and move forward.
Okay.
So part of the conversation in Caltrans is really about changing the lens of what we're doing. Many of you are familiar with the work that we do and our history. And so the time now is really calling for better and different. And I'm proud to say that Caltrans has been engaged in learning for the past couple of years. Go ahead and go to the next slide. And so I think that we are more prepared than we have been for the conversations that are happening now. And so over the last year, in my position, I have been talking to the executive board team about really how we change the lens of what we do, and where our focus has really been equality, right? Like that's federal compliance and things like that. We have the Equal Employment Opportunity Program, and the focus has always kind of been, let's treat everyone the same. But what we need to acknowledge is that treating everyone the same does not necessarily equate to equal outcomes. And so we need to switch that lens to where we are thinking about the outcomes and how do we get to the outcomes where everyone has the opportunity to be successful. And in that, we need to be intentional about our solutions and be talking about equity and having treatment that accounts for where people are, for our history, for the disparities, and for all of these other considerations that don't get factored into equality. And so the conversations that we've been having at the board, the graphics, I'm sure that some of you all have seen the box graphics of the people trying to see into the baseball game and things like this. This one is a fun one because it has to do with transportation. But often I find that people, equity is like an abstract concept. And so when we put a graphic in front of them, it's easier for them to grasp what we're actually saying. Next slide. Part of these conversations came out of the Caltrans participation in the 2018 and 19 Government Alliance on Race and Equity Capital Cohort. And the GARE program is a national coalition of government agencies that are learning about systemic racism and institutional racism and learning strategies to dismantle these systems and to do things differently. And so Caltrans had the opportunity to join in 2018 alongside 15 other state agencies who were all going, we were going to monthly meetings to learn about systemic racism, identifying disparities, getting to the root cause of disparities, and then having tools and resources to start implementing change, especially at the institutional level. Next slide. And so during our participation, the first year was a learning year. We did a lot of training. And in that time, we were also learning how to develop a racial equity action plan. And so in our first year, we had a group of headquarters employees. It was a relatively small group. The trainings were in Sacramento, and so we had Sacramento employees attending the trainings. Very quickly, we realized that A, our action plan was extremely large, and B, that there was no way that we could develop an action plan for a statewide implementation with a team of just Sacramento employees. And so in 2019, which was in the GARE model supposed to be our implementation year, we really had to come back to the table with an expanded group to include district participation and representation from as many different areas of the state as we could get to the table. And then we also had to understand that without any dedicated staff at this time, everyone who participated was a volunteer, including myself. Everyone had other responsibilities. They had 40-hour work weeks that consisted of not things that were equity. And so in 2019, we got a full-time position, which is me, and we're able to really start focusing in on what we needed to do. Next slide. And so we revamped our action plan to be a little bit more feasible. But before I talk about the action plan, I think that what I have put in front of our board is really important, that we have to acknowledge our history and the foundation of things that we were built on. And so this slide really represents kind of the legacy of government policies and practices that have created the disparities that we see today. And so on the left, Oakland is a redlining map of Oakland. And of course, if you know the history of redlining, these are federal loans that were not backed with the presence of minorities. So these were areas that were deemed cautious or hazardous to invest in. And usually the factor that determined that was the presence of minorities. And so what happened in these redlined areas were the areas where we ended up building freeways because we were looking for the cheapest route. And what determined the cheapest route was the housing prices. What determined the housing prices was the FHA redlining maps. And so we have to acknowledge that history in order to understand where we are today. So today we have on the right-hand side the CalEnviro of Oakland, and we can see that the red areas, the redlined areas now today are the areas that are most heavily burdened. And so that's not a coincidence. And we cannot shy away from this history if we expect to do better in the future. Next slide. So how do we do that? Go ahead, go for it. So Caltrans has been engaged in learning. I cannot stress that enough. It is a continuous process. We're nowhere near the place where all of our workforce is ready to tackle these conversations. But what is happening is that these conversations are happening. And so between 2018 and 19, we participated in the GARE cohort. We formed an internal team, which is the CARES team, the Caltrans Alliance for Race and Equity Solutions. And in 2019 to present day, we have done multiple presentations to our executive team and had conversations about how we can move forward. We've done recorded presentations that are accessible to our workforce and actually externally as well. We've crafted a race and equity action plan, which was approved by our executive board in December of 2019. We've started to broaden our presentations of information to inform our workforce. This is a very, very large effort. We have a workforce of over 20,000 staff. And so simply educating all of our workforce, would take years just by itself. But we have also added books and resources to our Caltrans library. We've created a website, and we're looking at equity really being instituted in our the next iteration of our strategic management plan, which, as you all may know, guides the work of the department. Next slide. So our action plan identifies 3 primary areas of focus: communication, pilot projects, and policy. Our goal with communication is really to engage our employees on racial equity solutions. The work cannot be done if we don't all do it. It makes no sense to have a workforce of 20,000 people and there's a 10-person team working on racial equity solutions. What we hope is that eventually all 20,000 people are engaged in this work and understand their role in our department. Communication also involves external communication. Eventually, what we really would like to do is have listening sessions with community and figure out where we genuinely stand with communities and how to repair and heal those relationships and move forward. You can go to the next slide. Our pilot projects are really where we're trying to look at processes and procedures and start to identify certain areas where we can disrupt the status quo and start to change course. And so we want to identify places where we have data and can collect data and then begin to shift our process and engagement and create different outcomes. And so where we say, like, we want to change Caltrans as a whole, we understand we can't change Caltrans overnight, and we need to show success with certain programs or projects in order to really get buy-in from other levels. One example of our pilots projects is a maintenance equipment disbursement project. And so we know what our equipment emissions are, and we have new and lower emitting equipment. And so we can prioritize the disbursement of that lower emitting equipment into more heavily burdened areas. Our third and final focus area is policy. And this is where we really start to get into the structural change. And so our hopes and goals there are really at developing a policy around equity, developing accountability, including equity in our plans, including the strategic management plan, which guides our work, and really allocating resources. If we say that something is important as a department, then we have to back that up with resources. And in order for this work to really continue, because the goal eventually is that the breadth and depth of Caltrans is engaged in equity work, and that it no longer needs to be specifically called out because it's just simply the way we do business. In order for that to happen, it needs to be structural. Next slide. And so part of that is that we have to acknowledge that we're new to this. And so we're looking at partnering with other people around the state and other transportation agencies who are engaged in this work, including Oakland's Department of Transportation, which has some really beautiful work working with communities and revamping the way that they do their paving. And they factored equity into a lot of the work that they're doing. So we've been looking for partners in this work, looking at OCDOT, looking at LA Metro. There are frameworks out there. We don't want to reinvent the wheel if we don't have to. If other people are showing success in certain areas, we can absolutely learn from that and grow from that. Next slide. So quickly, I will touch on active transportation before we get into the discussion. Nationally, the trends of pedestrian fatalities have been increasing steadily over the last decade. California is above average in pedestrian fatalities. I'm sure that you all are familiar with these numbers. I just simply put them on here because we need to hold these things. A lot of us do work, and the disparities become normalized to us. And so it's really important that we keep these at our forefront and we acknowledge them as we do the work that we do. So California ranks number 16 in pedestrian fatalities for the nation, with over 7,000 people killed between 2008 and 2017. Pedestrian deaths rose at an alarming rate between 2014 and 2018. They rose 26%. And Black people are dying at the highest rates, with 3.14 deaths per 100,000 people. The national rate is 1.55 people. The rate in California is 1.84. And so where California's rates are higher than national, we also need to acknowledge that within California, the rates of Black deaths are higher than even our average rates. Next slide.
Nope. Sorry.
Thank you. And so we also in this moment are seeing a call for greater conversation. And in that, we're seeing the deaths of people in open space, in open streets, at the hands of other citizens, at the hands of police. And so, these conversations really are about more than just who is able to walk on the street. And so we see that, excuse me. Sorry. We see that Black people are more likely to be killed by police. They are more likely to be unarmed. And we need to understand that in California, if we want to talk specifically about California, we have 2 of the 8 largest cities that kill Black men at higher rates than the U.S. murder rate. And so Santa Ana and Anaheim. And so these statistics are alarming, to say the least. Next slide. And so when we're seeing the deaths of Ahmaud Arbery, who was on a run in Georgia, and George Floyd, who was, literally killed in the street, when we see these deaths, we really, the reaction, right, the national reaction, the anger, the pain, the hurt, the protests, and to see people gathering in thousands in the streets, it's really a beautiful thing, right? But then to see that they're met with more brutality, with force, with policing, with this moment of great tension, and so much emotion. We really have to think deeper, and we have to think about what do open streets mean? Next slide. And when we talk about active transportation, when we talk about streets, when we talk about safety, when we talk about increasing walking and biking, we have to ask ourselves, for whom? For whom are all of these things possible? Next slide. And so there's a lot of discussion around the Safe Routes Partnership, and I want to highlight concrete actions that can be taken. And so, as Jim was just saying, that enforcement, we need to humanize enforcement. And I think that that's a really good point, right? In this moment where policing is such a contentious conversation, what can we do? What can we do? And so the Safe Routes Partnership has dropped the E of enforcement. And what does that look like, right? What does that mean in practice? Next slide. And so I want to tee up the discussion by just asking, what policies and programs can be developed or adjusted in service of equity? How can more meaningful partnerships with underserved communities be developed? And what does the reimagining of enforcement look like in practice and in theory? The next 2 slides are resources, and so we can look at them whenever. But this is a discussion that we want to have, and I'm happy to talk more about the Caltrans efforts. I'm happy to answer questions about that. I kept it very light and very brief because I want to have time to dive into this discussion. But I'm here to answer any questions you all may have for me as well.
This is Marianne. When you ask a question, unfortunately, it's not being shown to everybody who's on the call. So if you write your question in chat, we'll read it aloud, and then Rhiannah or any of us can discuss it. If you would like to speak, you need to use the raise hand feature, and I'll unmute you. So the first question, what policies and programs can be developed to promote equity? Sort of cut off because of my chat screen.
This is Jim Day. Am I unmuted? Yeah?
Yes.
Okay, terrific, Marianne. And Rhiannah, wonderful presentation. One of the guidelines that are showing better equity is the active transportation program, at least on the local assistance side. I'm not speaking for the Caltrans capital side. On the local assistance side, it is in the CTC guidelines, California Transportation Commission guidelines, that we do have the very first question: is this project going towards a disadvantaged community? The applicants have to really strive to say, my project is going to service this disadvantaged community. And they have to identify that community with, such as the Cal Environmental Screen, or the school lunches program, or the median household income program. They have to prove that this is a disadvantaged community, and then they have to prove that this project is conveying or helping this community by such. And the community, the applicants, again, have to prove that they reached out to the community and the community said, yes, we want this. And that is the biggest thing to show equity. And just to, one thing you can probably look at with the active transportation for the last 4 cycles, how many projects were actually built or constructed towards a disadvantaged community? And the percentage is about 80%. They put down what do you call it, an aspirational goal of 25%, but the very first year, and I've been a part of this for 20 years now, really, the very first year was 88%. And then what the CTC did was, their staff did, we want to look closer at what is a disadvantaged community. They wanted to make sure that they weren't just getting something that touched a disadvantaged community, but didn't really service them. And so the questions got tougher. It was terrific. So active transportation program, the way that the CTC guidelines are now, are very much in line in improving equity, or at least improving equity as best they can. I think you should really convey that to other members, other parties in your work group, that, hey, let's look at what the CTC is doing as that part of Caltrans. And then there's another group, the Highway Safety Improvement Program. That's our safety money. On the Caltrans capital side, that's called 010 money. On the local assistance side, it's just HSIP. And HSIP is data driven. If you're having a lot of collisions and fatalities, wherever those collisions and fatalities are, that's where the money goes. It doesn't go to this neighborhood or that neighborhood. It goes to where the collisions are, the collision cluster or the corridor. The corridor could be several intersections along one long street, like in this case, you would say Watt Avenue, or a couple of the other ones in Sacramento. I've been involved with HSIP all the time these 20 years. It's been fantastic. Again, it's where the accidents happen. It's not the person, it's not a neighborhood, it's the data, okay? And I really want to convey that these two programs, and the capital side does have, they're trying to do ATP now, and they're using SHOP funds, SHOPP funds. So this is going to really help. We need to steamroll this, get the motivation going. So if you want to talk to anyone at local assistance headquarters, they will sit down and talk to you about how ATP is going on, or the CTC staff would love to talk to you as well about how they're working towards disadvantaged communities and towards this aspect. And I'll go ahead and mute myself to let someone else chat.
Thanks so much, Jim. Lots of good information. And Jim has been, as he said, around for 20 years, so he knows where all the money is. So thanks so much, Jim, for that input. We really appreciate it. Any more questions? If you want, again, we'll read the questions that come in on chat. I think we have one. And if you want to speak, raise your hand. Thank you. Jim's last name is Jim Day, and he's retiring, or pretty darn soon, and he's in District 3, so that district does do a wonderful job. I know that question came in. What's Jim's last name and title? Is there another question is there information on which equity program staff person covers the other Caltrans districts? I'll turn that over to Rhiannah.
Yeah, so I am the only person who's full-time dedicated to the work. I do have staff members in other districts. If you're looking for a district specifically, I'm happy to coordinate connecting you with someone. We do not have right now specific reps from each district or people who are fully funded to engage in this work in each district.
Hi, this is Victoria. I'm going to follow up on that question and see if Rhiannah and or Summer are able to talk a little bit about the Caltrans active, I want to call them CAT plans, the active transportation plans, and whether there's an equity component to those plans as they're rolling out at the districts. And I understand that this is all really new, but and you know, I know that Rhiannah's not the lead. That's I think it's more under the planning department. But if you could, if you have information on that, is that something you could share? Because that could be a point person at each of the districts. Because I know that equity is a component of all of the district active transportation plans.
Yeah, so I'll comment on that quickly. So yes, each district is in charge of their own CAT plans. Only as of right now, I only have a request from one district to work specifically with them on that plan. I will say, to Jim's point, that active transportation does better than some of our other programs at factoring in disadvantaged communities as a metric for projects. Does that get all the way to genuine equity work? That's a question that can be explored. But this is kind of an interesting thing about Caltrans is that we have these large statewide programs and each district is in charge of their own. I think that there is some discussion about how to better work as a whole to make sure that there are certain factors that are looked into. But yes, each district will have their own rep who is working specifically either internally or with consultants on the CAT plans for that area.
Also, if I could add, this is Summer. There is a website about the CAT plans, and it's just catplan.org, and you can read about the plans if you're interested. But equity is one of the goals of towards an active California, and they do have a goal to focus on social equity throughout their engagement with underserved and disadvantaged communities. So it is a goal. I wish I could speak more to it. I'm pretty new to the CAT plans and just started learning about them a couple months ago. But yeah, I really encourage anyone that's interested in knowing more about the CAT plans or what the goals are of the CAT plans to take a look at the website and then read through about the plans, and there's a lot of resources listed there as well.
Yeah, we'll definitely send that information out along with the slides, because it's definitely worth a look. Yes, I really appreciate your both your points in terms of recognizing that the overall towards an active California active transportation plan did build an equity into the frame, and yeah, I think more deliberate work can be done at each of the districts to call it out and to make sure it's really you know, that we're doing it in a meaningful way. I think that leads to your second question, discussion question. I'm going to look to the chat right now, and we do have a really good question that is looking at anti-displacement and gentrification. And so this question comes in, and so this community is grappling with how they can both invest in historically disadvantaged communities through large active transportation with corresponding non-infrastructure programs that are focused on equity. But there is a risk of gentrification that can result from certain projects. They are developing an active anti-displacement an anti-displacement plan, which is wonderful. Do you have any recommendations or ideas of how to bring anti-displacement practices or policies into a Safe Routes to School program? I will say, as part of the Active Transportation Resource Center, we do not have anything prepared yet. However, we do recognize that this has increasingly become an issue. And so as far as revising our existing resources and augmenting them, this is definitely a topic that we're looking into. And then clearly we are tuned in with the Safe Routes National Partnership, and we understand that they've been working on this issue in some different ways, and they are prolific in their resource development, and we would hope that they might also be someone that we can turn to. But at this time, no, we don't have any existing resources at the ATRC on anti-displacement and gentrification and how to prevent that as we're moving forward with a robust Safe Routes to School program. But I encourage anyone that's on the call right now, if they do have something to chime in, we would love to have that. We'd love to have that on our radar, and if the time for this teleconference doesn't allow for you to share, we could always invite a speaker to come back for a future teleconference to speak to what it looks like at the local level. Marianne, are you seeing any hands raised?
Not right now. Jim had it, but he lowered it. Adar, did that answer your question? Victoria just read it for you. I hope that answered your question. Yes, it was. We have a question from Paul. And Affordable Housing and Sustainable Communities Grant Program has a very specific anti-displacement criteria, if I recall correctly. Thank you, Paul, for that input.
Perfect. Yeah. And Rhiannah,
Jim,
I jumped in quickly, but I wanted to make sure that Rhiannah had a chance to talk about or to respond to that second question about recommendations or ideas to bring in anti-displacement practices and policies into, and I'll just make it broader than just Safe Routes to School, but active transportation or sustainable transportation work.
Yeah, what a loaded topic. I don't know how many of you watch the CTC meetings, but at our last CTC meeting, Charles Brown, who's and I quote, street level researcher, talked about how, paraphrasing, that the bike lanes go up just in time for the white people to move in, and so it's a huge risk. It's a huge issue that we come in and we make these investments, and then the communities who have lived there forever, and the people who have lived there forever and built the community can no longer afford to stay there. Do I have specific ideas or policies? The short answer is no. It's not my singular focus, and so I feel like there are so many resources and people and knowledge bases to pull from that focus on that specific issue. My specific role is really about the broader moving Caltrans as a whole forward, and empowering our employees and our department to look at issues like that. And so how do we simultaneously understand that our investments are great, and how do we institute policy and perhaps procedural change to prevent the displacement? So I hope that answered the question. The short answer is that no, I don't have specific policy recommendations for you. The longer answer is just that I think there is broad research into this area. There are programs that are being very cognizant of this and are really working hard to institute policies. And I would look there.
Yeah, and again, well, yeah, this is a. Go ahead, Marianne. I was just going to weigh in, but go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to read the chat and let someone speak. So go ahead and finish the topic.
Oh yeah, I was just going to say, yeah, I think we can also go a little bit deeper here. Again, this is we're glad to bring this in. If you have Adar, we can definitely follow up with you more if you if you need some help researching these things. The other piece is that we are aware of certain groups in Southern California that are doing some work that seems to be very innovative, like People for Mobility Justice is really kind of expanding on how they're doing engagement and how they're looking at education to look at root causes and to look at systemic disparities, inequities, and bringing that into light. So it's a little more holistic. So I think in that regard, there might even be some new resources that were in the works when we kind of previously had conversations that we can really maybe pursue if there's interest. So, and thank you, Rhiannah, for jumping in on that. I kind of put you on the spot on that one. Okay, Marianne.
Okay. All right. One of the this is input to equity and plans. Alyssa commented that I'm working with CAT plans. Equity will be a component of the CAT plans. However, it's up to each district on how to prioritize the components. So that's Caltrans ease. So I can't expand on that, but that's just an FYI. Let me, and then Summer, you can chime in on that if you'd like. Let me get Megan on the line if you want to raise your hand again. I'll unmute you. Okay, go ahead, Megan.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to build off of what someone had noted earlier about the affordable housing program. And I know that I know that anti-displacement was a part of their grant. And I remember when we were looking at adding it into the application, we had looked at what those grants had did, and a lot of them were, cities that are in the planning stages. They're also creating task forces. They're also trying to come up with policies. But I know that I had looked into Fresno's, and I know they've created a task force, and I believe they've started meetings. So they might be a source for someone. But it is something that I don't have any specific comments as far as safe routes to schools, but it's a lot of looking at kind of the task force and policies that are working towards being created. Because I think even though anti-displacement and gentrification isn't new, I think we haven't really looked into it as much as we could. And so just trying to see what other locations are doing, where they're starting from, is really kind of what we've been doing. Thank you.
And Megan, would you tell the audience who you are? Because you referred to you're working on it, so they may not know.
Oh, yes. I apologize. I'm so sorry. I am a program analyst with the California Transportation Commission, and I work mostly with the active transportation program under Lori Waters.
Thanks.
Thank you. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? I know we have we've talked about anti-displacement, and we sort of haven't talked about these three questions. And they're big, heady questions, and we only have about 7 minutes left. So they'll be mailed out in a Survey Monkey afterwards, so you can respond to these more thoughtfully and more expansively, so that we definitely want this communication for Caltrans to see what you all are thinking and that equity is a priority for you. It's a struggle because of this. We want you to really expand on these questions, but we still have time. So anybody else have, I think a question came in here. Victoria, would you read Adar's question? Thanks.
Sure. Can you hear me? One more question. We are hoping to include opportunities for youth employment as part of our Safe Routes to School program. According to the non-infrastructure guidance, they would not be able to get paid through incentives or as staff. Is hiring youth as consultants allowable? For example, to conduct research and advocacy activities among their peers for safety and mobility, or to run student bike lending program at the infrastructure project. Summer, do you want to?
Yeah, I can talk about that. Sure. So I think what you're referring to is that volunteers can't be paid through incentives or as staff, but we have seen programs, non-infrastructure programs and projects where interns have been hired. So again, we really want to encourage the innovation and the creativity of your projects and programs. And if interns are a part of that, then yeah, we'll take a look at your 22R, and if it really contributes to the overall goals of education and active transportation and encouragement of active transportation and safety, and implementing a program that's a strong proposal and things like that, then yeah, I mean, it's something that we could consider, and it's really just all about that overall project and goals. So yeah, that's a good question. Thank you for asking that.
Yeah, and Rhiannah, I don't remember if one of the things that you're exploring as part of the racial equity plan at Caltrans is contracting. Was that a piece that is part of the plan, or was that one of the things that kind of is something that's there? And the reason I'm asking is because I think that whole idea of hiring youth would be wonderful, or working with local nonprofits, but there's policies and procedures that would need to be worked through. I'm just wondering if that's ever been kind of looked at as part of that, part of the discussions through the Caltrans GARE work, or yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Contracting is a huge area. This is kind of two-pronged, because we have contracting in the sense of like projects and business, which is housed in our civil rights area. So yes, those are conversations that are happening. The conversations that I think are more applicable to what we're talking about now are in the planning scope of things. And luckily, one of our biggest supporters and one of our executive sponsors is Jeannie Ward-Waller, who is the Deputy of Planning and Modal Programs. And there are very large conversations happening in that area around contracting for community engagement. How do we pay people for their time? Who do we pay? And how can we get that money really circulated to show our appreciation and our gratitude and the value of our engagement? So yes, those conversations are happening.
Perfect, thank you. And we also have a comment.
Okay.
Marianne, go ahead. Sorry.
No, I'm not seeing the comment. I was just going to advance the slide so you can see Rhiannah's contact information, but go ahead, Victoria, and read the comment.
Yeah, so I wanted to read this comment, but before I do that, I just wanted to really thank Rhiannah for joining us this morning. We are so grateful that she was able to present for us. Initially, we just invited her to be part of our discussion, but then we realized that we just had this diamond amongst us, and we thought, could you please help us frame this conversation? This has been, we're dealing with multiple pandemics right now, and it feels like, our way out of it is finding people who can really help shape the conversation as we move forward. And so we're so grateful, Rhiannah. And we also want to know, we want we hope we can continue to work with you on this as we know that this is the priority for our state moving forward. So I want to thank you for joining us. And here is her contact information. Did you have any parting words for our group? We're going to have to wrap up the call because we're running out of time.
No, just thank you to you all for inviting me to be here. Thank you for listening and engaging. I love conversations like this, and I look forward to having more of them. Please reach out to me. I'm available. I'm here. I'm happy to talk.
Thank you so much. All right. And we are going to just have to hold off on some of the other questions and comments that are coming through. There's some really good ones. Marianne, Summer, and I will be reviewing the chat log and following up with anyone that wasn't able to have their question or comment shared. And you've given all of us a really good foundation to move on from here. I think we'll be looking at listening to this recording, looking at these notes and figuring where to go from here. But thank you again, Rhiannah, for leading us through this discussion. Marianne, do you want to wrap us up in the interest of time?
Yes. Quickly, we did, when you get the survey after this call, I asked for interest items, and this is a list of the ones we got in March, just FYI. So we do read them. And just so you know, Emily will be back August 3rd. Yay, Emily. Summer spoke. And then Victoria and I handle these districts. We split up the state by these districts. I have Northern California, Victoria has Southern. And here's our contact information. If you don't already have it, it's all on the ATRC website, which is caatpresources.org. And we have many, many, many links on this slide presentation. So what we'll do is we'll pull out these links as well as others. For example, capplans.org got mentioned onto a Word file, so you can have all the links handy for you. So generally, everything's recorded and posted onto the ATRC. It takes about a week, unfortunately, to get all that done. There'll be a PDF of the slides. There'll be this resource with all the links that I just said that we'll put together. There'll be probably chat questions that apply to many people. We'll have that document. And then, of course, you'll have the YouTube recording. And so that will be up on the ATRC forever, so you can refer to it. So thanks so much. As I mentioned earlier, this is our first stab at doing all this remotely. And our next round, I'll really try to make sure that everybody can see the chat that as they come in, so we don't have to read the questions or questions don't get repeated. Thanks so much. I really appreciate everybody. I'm so excited we had Rhiannah, and I'm so excited you joined us. I can't tell you how grateful I am. Thank you very much. I'm going to go ahead and end the event and save everything so you can have it for reference.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.